Well, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us once again. This is Deer and Deer Hunting's Deer Talk Now podcast. I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us. Today, our guest, we're going to talk about deer hunting, real world deer hunting with Tom Carpenter, a longtime deer and deer hunting writer, author. He works for the Journal of Upland Conservation with Pheasants Forever right now, and he has worked for North American Hunting Club. He's written for Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, but he is one of the most realistic and down-to-earth deer hunters that I know. So let's bring Tom on the program, and let's talk deer hunting. So there he is. There's Tom. We are live, Deer Talk Now. Tom, thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun. I don't know quite what we're going to talk about, but if it's whitetails, I'm sure it's going to be fun.
Well, we're going to talk about deer hunting. I mean, this is basically, I envision this as my virtual deer camp. And we're sitting there, I'm looking at all your antlers, which actually looks like my hall right here at work. I think I have like 25 racks just like that, up and down and all around. For those of you who don't know Tom, number one, he will never talk about himself, so he's going to leave that all to me. But the other thing is, when I do incorporate the Big or Small, I Shoot 'em All club, I think you're going to be the co-founder.
Yeah, I wrote a story and I want to reprise it in one way, shape, or form. I don't know how many years ago it was now, but it was called In Praise of Little Bucks. And I tell you what, I mean, who knows where we're going to go in our little conversation today, but I love little bucks. And I've never put a tape measure on a buck in my life. But there's everything right about every kind of whitetail hunting. And my kind is gathering venison. And I don't care if it has 6-inch spikes or what somebody might say is a Boone and Crockett buck. They're all great to me. In fact, I also wrote a story once called, I can't remember the exact title was, can somebody get me a spike buck? I've never shot a true spike, despite the racks you see on my back there. So that's sort of one nutshell of me as a deer hunter.
And basically we grew up one and the same. So give us all a little bit of background. I know you grew up in southwestern Wisconsin, but just for everybody who doesn't know, Tom does it all. He's a pheasant hunter, big time pheasant hunter, duck hunter, you name it. He's out there doing it. Turkey hunter, a rabid turkey hunter. But as far as your deer hunting background, walk us through how you started and where you are today with your deer hunting.
Well, deer hunting is a progression, as is every type of hunting. We talk a lot about the stages of the hunter. And in fact, the folks who came up with that back in the late 70s from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and La Crosse, Nelson and Heberlein. Heberlein was one of my professors when I was in the ag school at the University of Wisconsin. And they talk about the stages of the hunter. And I've went through all the stages. And the beauty of hunting is you can be in different stages for different types of hunting. I'm even at different stages for different types of bird hunting. But they go from, if you're not familiar with it, they go from participating, I just want to hunt, to shooting, I want to shoot my gun, to getting something, I want to limit out, to trophies, I want the big buck, to method, I'm going to do it with with a longbow. And for me, I'm getting ready to become a crossbow hunter. And then you're back to experience and participation. So I grew up in southwestern Wisconsin. I first hunted deer in 1974. In those days, if you can believe it, we had a 3-day season and it was either sex, it was shotgun slugs. And the reason that it was either sex was you didn't have much of a chance of getting a deer if you couldn't just shoot one you saw. It wasn't because there were a lot of deer around, it's because there weren't many and nobody was going to go hunting. for the small chance of even finding a buck, any buck. I always joke in those days, we used to, after a pheasant hunt, we'd take our guns out to the gravel pit to shoot our slugs and see how they're shooting, before deer season next weekend. And we put out a big old box, and we'd shoot a slug. And if you didn't hit the box, you know what we did? We got a bigger box. I can't claim that joke. That's from the famous. That's Gary. I stole that one from Gary Clancy.
Oh my gosh, really?
That's actually what we did. But he's the first one I ever thought. He's the first one that had the to say it.
Clancy was, man, I loved Clancy. You worked with him pretty closely too. That is an awesome quote.
I did. I worked with him a lot, and I worked with him in some of my as an editor when I was editor at the Hunting and Fishing Library as well. He wrote the best hunting whitetail book of all time, Whitetail Deer, for the Hunting and Fishing Library. It's probably sold over 350,000.
Wow.
He was a real deal in all aspects of life. But so I grew up hunting slugs down there with my father, my two brothers, and that was the start of it all. Southwestern Wisconsin, in those days, it was a totally different scenario than it is today. And there's all these topics we can get into. But one of them was, you pretty much, it was a difference. We lived in a rural area. You knew everybody. You pretty much hunted where you wanted. The deer drive was a big deal. You sat for an hour in the morning, and then you got together and pushed these wood lots and did that work together. And it was fun. So I only hunted deer in Wisconsin, probably through college. I went to the University of Wisconsin. I'm proud to say I'm a Badger lover, but I never attended a football game while in college because I was in a deer stand. I'd go home at noon every Friday and start bow hunt. So when I moved to Minnesota for life after college, that was my first expansion into another state. Wow, I got to find a place to hunt. I've got to hunt in Minnesota. That's when I was introduced, other than a couple forays to northwestern Wisconsin, to more big woods hunting of central Minnesota. I've since expanded and hunted southeastern Minnesota, which is a lot like southwestern Wisconsin. I love that area. I've also hunted in both Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois. My deer hunting is all Midwestern. I haven't traveled as far as wide to hunt deer as I have turkeys, but it includes slug hunting, which is a much different scenario today than our old boxes in the gravel pit, and rifle hunt a lot. I'm a firearms hunter more than I am anything else. I'm going to be 60 this year, and I think my opportunities for a crossbow are opening up, and that I want to do that. I've went through progressions in deer hunting, from caring about big deer to now where I don't care about big deer, and I think I'm back. It might be a little early in my life stage, but I'm almost back to just participation and hunting with my boys and working to try and have hunts with them. We had a hunt a couple years ago in Nebraska, late season, antlerless deer rifle. There's nothing I love better than a hunt like that. Just us in a farmhouse and antlerless deer, and cooking, putting a meal in the oven at 1 o'clock and letting it slow roast, and going out to the stands at 2 o'clock because it gets dark at 4 at that time of year. That's the ideal of deer hunting, that type of scenario. Deer camp, being with the people you love.
That's one of the things that I really admire about you, because you do put your family first. I've seen, and we've talked about it over the years, where you do some of these little jaunts to one of the Dakotas, and you guys have the Antlerless Only season. And I've always said, I mean, just like how I grew up, I mean, like, it didn't matter. You got a deer. And what I've always found fascinating is, it seems to me that you've never lost that wide-eyed appreciation for just not only getting a deer, but just experiencing everything that the hunt offers.
I think that's absolutely true, Dan. And I think one of the factors in that is that I went through a time when I was hunting 4 to 6 states a year, and it became work, and it became maybe it's not the right word, but it became drudgery. It was pressure, and it was a little too intense. I don't hunt that many states anymore. I probably hunt two to three a year now for deer, because I am a pretty rounded hunter, and I do love upland hunting, as you know. And I have a bird dog, and I think a lot about my little bird dog, and I should be hunting with her, but I still get my deer hunting in, and it 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 has become more of a pastime to be with family, and not as much of a I've got to get the biggest antlers, I've got to shoot the most deer, a competition to see who can put the most pictures up on their social media. That's not my style. Last year in Wisconsin, we hunted on a friend's farm, and man, it's limited ground, but we hunt it in smart ways, with my landowner friend. He's a great guy. Craig Carter is his name. And we hunted a couple of mornings, and three of us had deer. And my last son, or my middle son, was on a stand on the second day of the season, and we're skinning a deer in Craig's shop, and I for some reason I heard my phone buzz, and I don't know why, and I looked at it, and it was my son who was on a deer stand, and he said, "Dad, I've got a spike buck 150 yards away. I think I can shoot it. Do you think will anybody mind?" And I said, "No, just take it." And it's hilly country. And about 1 minute later, I heard a shot, and I thought, oh. And then I heard a second shot, and I thought, oh boy. Shot deer down, shoot two shots. Uh-oh. And I got another call, or I got a text. He said, "I got one." And I was never so happy in my life, to go out, and all three of us went out there, and we helped him. He had shot it in a sort of an overgrown pasture, just brambles and berries, and he couldn't find it. I mean, it had 150 yards from him, and it dropped, and things looked different on the ground, and we're all looking around and getting our clothes ripped, and it was just the most fun. It was the most fun I've had deer hunting ever, and it's a 4-point yearling buck, and boy, does he taste good.
That is awesome. I think probably the next best line than getting a text saying "I got one" is when you're in the woods and you're looking for blood, and your buddy says, "I got blood."
Yeah,
that's got to be the best.
It makes that heart jump into the throat, and it makes you excited and anticipation all in one. Did I get a good shot? Now I got to really go to work. How are we going to do this the smart way, and not lose this trail, but keep the trail, and see what pattern that deer is taking. It's excitement, to be sure.
So how do you compare? Because I know you've taught not only your sons, you've taught a lot of people on how to deer hunt. You've written a book. I know that was quite a few years ago. Actually, I was trying to look at this, a sidebar here. I think the first time that I became aware of you was in 1998 when you co-wrote that mule deer book for Krause Publications. But that's a sidebar. No, compare. You're just a couple years older than I am. I didn't get to go deer hunting until about. I wasn't 12 because when I was a kid, my dad said you had to work to earn enough money to buy your gun before you could go to deer camp. So it took me a while to do that. But when I first started, it was kind of similar. Compare getting into deer hunting when you started as opposed to what you see today when you're trying to explain to somebody or teach somebody about getting into deer hunting. What are the differences?
I think one big difference is equipment. Just the comfort level you can equip yourself with because of today's fabrics and boots and availability of those materials. I think of putting on cotton long underwear and blue jeans and our boots from Kmart that if it was too cold out, they'd crack. The rubber would crack, and 4 layers of in a pullover sweatshirt and two stocking caps. And my mom sewing red onto our blue jeans. So, and just that whole variety of equipment is so much better today. So is the things we kill deer with. So are the things we kill deer with. The rifles, the bows. It's just incredible. I remember shooting bows at Marshall Bluff Bow Hunters, and it's a field archery range, Monticello, Wisconsin. I grew up there, and I remember when the first time somebody had a compound bow that shot 200 feet per second. We thought we had figured out how to. We thought we're as good as the guys who first walked on the moon, and look what we have today. All that equipment, though, also can breed a different type of hunting. And I sort of am this old school that continually goes back to the basics and don't rely on that equipment, but rely on woodsmanship and scouting and other factors that are going to they really increase your skill and your satisfaction. I think second thing is I hope that all makes sense. I think a second thing is the way we hunt deer is so different today. In many ways, it's good, but in many ways, I think it's changed, and it's probably not going to change back. Our land ownership patterns have changed so much. Access is so hard, and let's face it, a lot of the bulk of whitetail hunting happens on private land. And I mean, I am experiencing it myself, that the squeeze is real on the average hunter to get access to good hunting land. Fortunately, there are such ideals as public land. There's also walk-in hunting, and there are other ways to get access. But I think access to hunt, a place to hunt is one of the biggest challenges facing today's hunter. As I said, we can lament about the old days and miss them when we could pretty much go wherever we wanted, and we flushed 4 deer and they're over in Smith's woodlot. Let's go get them. You can't do that in this day and age, and that's bred this different type of hunting. And stand hunting, sitting still. And man, I still like to get out and move while I hunt, but it's harder with today's land ownership patterns. If you're squeezed on 20 acres or 40 or 300, and you've got these stands, and people are going to hunt morning and evening. You don't want to be pushing your deer out. Lord help us, you don't want somebody else on the neighboring property to shoot them. So there's not a lot of that team up type hunting that I still enjoy, and frankly don't get much chance to do anymore. So I think those are two big changes. The third is, social media can be a wonderful thing and it can be a horrible thing. And I think, we're not here to judge it, but it creates personas, and it creates, pictures, and people can present what they want on social media. And I challenge us all as serious whitetail hunters to think about what we post on social media and what messages is it sending to new hunters, to other hunters, and to non-hunters. And not only in the how we hunt, but what we shoot and the values we bring to the hunt.
Excellent points, Tom, and I agree with all of them, obviously. One of the things that you bring up that you still adhere to, which I find fascinating because you can't do it in most places. Well, you can, but you can't. A couple things. Number one is you've written articles about the one-man deer drive. You've written articles about pushing deer, not necessarily deer drives, but The old timers, oh, we're going to get out and get them moving. You know, yeah, we got to get those deer moving. But basically what that was just moving deer so they would move around. You still do that to a certain extent today, don't you?
Yeah, when the land we're hunting permits it and we want something to happen, like on sometimes on these late season antlerless hunts, that we'll get involved in every once in a while. I'll just do it to do it and to give my kids a little flavor of it. Because you talked about I got blood. You can also talk about getting the excitement of planning something, and you go here and I'm going to do here. And my dad, who is no longer with us, he shot his last deer at the age of 84, about, well, it's probably a dozen years ago now. But he called it the nudge.
The
And
nudge.
if I've got to be politically correct, but he would call the person who was doing the nudging. He said, "You just sneak through there indigenous people fashion.
Yeah.
It wasn't a yell or a push. You snuck around. You were sneaking around, and you just got those deer up and thinking about going somewhere else. And that's how we would do it. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of just doing these little nudges, and frankly, that could be something you can do on maybe some limited ground. Is you're not ganging it, you're not lining up six people and 10 yards, 20 yards apart and pushing through. You're just getting one person still hunting around and trying to get deer moving. Uh, I know whitetails, whitetails, we all know whitetails. They don't leave their home range. They're still going to be around. And if you're not, banging away and doing some of the old fashioned deer hunt, deer drive stuff we used to do, which, oh, by the way, I liked and was exciting, but you can do it in this day and age. And I think for a lot of younger or new hunters, what an element that they might never experience, that you're sitting in a shooting blind all the time, and wow, I'm actually walking out in the woods. I can,
Actually learning something about the deer.
yeah, exactly. And I learned a lot. It was funny. I was the youngest of my three brothers. I was sort of an afterthought kid, but I was like the field marshal for our hunts. I think because I was even from the time I was 12, 13, 14 years old, it's time to push deer. Tommy, what are we going to do? And I learned stuff. I mean, that deer don't go where you want them to go. They go where they want to go, and it's usually not straight ahead like a good little animal. They go off to the side. They go back. They don't leave anywhere. And I still remember there was a time if I'm doing a nudge, I want to be the pusher. And believe it or not, and this is the one thing I'll say is about myself and deer I've shot 4 deer in my life coming out of their beds just by being right on top of them and making them nervous enough by being there. And you know what? If I wasn't nudging along, I would have walked right past them. And it makes you think, how many deer do you walk past that you just never see? And I'm pretty proud of that. And I've shot 4
That's
deer
awesome.
beds.
That's awesome. It's kind of like I cut my teeth on rabbit hunting, cotton-tailed rabbits in southeastern Wisconsin, and that's basically we had beagles when I was very young, but then we didn't anymore, and I had to do it by myself, and that's pretty much how I learned how to deer hunt. Was if you're rabbit hunting, you can walk past a lot of rabbits. If you don't, people think, oh, you just go stomp on brush piles. Well, that works on the young ones in October. But once you get to December, they get pretty smart, and it's just like deer. And I think that's some good points that you bring up, especially for a younger hunter today. I mean, we're guilty of it. We have TV shows, we have videos, and, oh, here's your Banks blind, and here's your, Antler King food plot, and the deer are going to come in. But if you can get out there and walk around and, like you said, learn where the deer bed, learn how they escape, or what they do, because that will stay consistent for generations. Like we used to hunt in Bayfield County. That's where I grew up hunting. And when those deer when we try to do, it was kind of comical, try to do a deer drive or a push, like you said, they squirt out the sides, they go out the back, they double back. And that's how I learned how to bow hunt up there was, 3, 4, 5, 6 years after that, those deer are using those same trails, those same patterns when they're pressured. So that's some great points that you bring up there. Man. Okay, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to thank one of our sponsors. Today's episode of Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Scent Killer Gold Laundry Detergent with Power Boost Plus from Wildlife Research Center. Featuring ultra-concentrated odor-fighting power and ultra-premium dirt and stain-removing powder, Scent Killer Gold provides twice as many loads per ounce compared to regular Scent Killer laundry detergent. I use this stuff year-round, not just for hunting season. I have allergies. This stuff is hypoallergenic. It's scent-free. I use it on all my clothes. No, I don't smell like a GQ guy when I go out or anywhere, but Scent Killer Gold laundry detergent really helps me, and it's very economical. You only have to use that little cap. That's it. One little cap of that stuff in an entire extra large load of laundry. Pull your clothes out, smell it. There's not going to be any scent there at all. It's pretty incredible stuff. Take your scent elimination to an extreme level by looking for those gold caps. Wildlife actually owns the copyright on the color of those caps because a lot of other competitors have been trying to rip it off and have their packaging look like Scent Killer Gold. Get some at your local sporting goods dealer or check it out at wildlife.com. What about, I know that you do some of these hunts out of state on public land, and I would always say, man, your glass is a lot more half full than mine, because what's your approach? Because you're going to another place a lot of times with your kids, and you're going on public land. Most guys today would say, man, that's going to suck. It's not going to be any good. What's your approach to tackling a new piece of ground out of state?
Well, so some of these late hunts are private land, but when it's public land, I have a couple tactics, and they're not that different than my bird hunting tactics on public land. I have several rules of thumb, and one is, hunt weekdays, avoid pressure. We all work for a living. We all work hard for a living. I'm a blue collar hunter. We're all blue. If we're deer hunters, we're all blue collar in some way, shape, or form. We work. Use some of that PTO time and hunt on, no matter what time of the season is or where it is. You're going to see less hunting pressure on weekdays. Now that's hard in a gun type season, but I think we're talking a little more here. Not your basic influx of opening day gun season. That's a free for all. But weekdays are important. Strategize when you hunt. Another thing is where you hunt. With modern tools like OnX, and even Google Maps for that matter, with satellite photography, but OnX is the gold standard because you can do it all. Know where you stand, know what's public and what's not, and also figure out what's out of the way and what's not. Go the extra mile. I tell you what, it works in turkey hunting and bird hunting and deer hunting. Most people don't go far off in your road. They don't put in the effort. I'm willing to put in more effort, more miles, more time, and getting off the beaten path. And that's an old phrase, but it's true. You got to get off the beaten path, back where nobody goes. I know some spots on public in southeastern Minnesota, parcels in southwestern Wisconsin, places out in the Black Hills, western North Dakota, where there's tons and tons of land and you can't rifle hunt except with extreme once in a lifetime luck. But oh, by the way, you can bow hunt. There are magnificent places to hunt public land deer, especially archery. And you got to just get in a vehicle and go do it. But you still got to get off the beaten path. You've got to avoid the other hunters. There's a limited amount of public land, and more of us need to hunt public land because of these pressures we're talking about land ownership patterns and private land. So those are just a couple of my tips. Effort, effort, and energy is the simple equation, and you got to do a little bit to outsmart other hunters.
That's what I was going to add. Is you also have to have that element of not broadcasting where you're going.
Yeah, I tell many people this, and it's true. I'll tell you how to do something all day, but I'll never tell you where I.
Well, let me put you on the spot there without telling me the specific GPS coordinates. If you could only take one out of state hunt for deer hunting, now it doesn't have to. And like I said, this is just deer hunting. This is general, ubiquitous term. Where would you go outside of Minnesota?
If what's the scenario?
The
Is it,
scenario is you would just want to go deer hunting, have fun, and have a very good chance of getting a deer.
does it have to be a new place?
No.
Well, that's a tough one. But I got to think quick here. So I'll set the scenario. Tom, we're paying. This is magic. You're getting your expenses paid, and you can go to this place. And your goal is to be with your four boys, and you each want to shoot a nice buck. I'm going to assume I can get some access to some real good. Is it public or private, or can I get
Let's say public. Let's say public land.
I would go to, I would probably go bow hunting in the West. I'd probably get out on the big expanses of public land and do some bow hunting in the West. That just is what comes off the top of my head.
That's what I would do. I would say Wyoming for me because I've been there and I've done it so many times. Even though I'm
Well,
hunting private land with an outfitter, I know there's tons of public land where it
yeah,
can be done.
I was thinking similar Montana, Western North Dakota, which might be more mule deer country. Um, the I almost hesitate to say it, but the Missouri River corridor through those states, man, here's the one thing I'll say, that Missouri River corridor and all the public land along that. If you got the nads to get out there and get in there, and that's why I say it. There ain't many people there ain't many people who are going to do that. But but remembering all this, I'm not worried about shooting 160
Right.
inch or something. I just want to stick my arrow in a deer and bring some venison home and have a good time.
So on that same topic, because what a lot of people don't know is, well, you worked for North American Hunting Club for what, like 14 years?
Yep.
And then you work now with Pheasants Forever, which is basically you do the Upland magazine, which I had to do my research on that. Tom is only the third editor of that magazine, the Journal of Upland Conservation. If you had to do a combo hunt, which my first true combo hunt came by accident in north central Nebraska, probably 6 years ago. That was with Scott and LaKayla Fink up in Cherry County, Nebraska. I got to hunt pheasants. I shot my first prairie chicken. I hunted ducks, so I shot I don't know how many different kinds of ducks. And oh, by the way, I shot a giant mule deer. What types of hunts, or should I say, not specific locations, but I know you do that. I mean, I know you do a lot of bird hunting. Where can a guy go today and have that type of experience? Maybe on public land even.
I would, I'm a prairie guy. I'm a Midwestern guy. So we're talking a lot about that. So I would say out on the prairies, Western Dakotas would be the thing. Western Dakotas for upland birds, and whitetails or mule deer. Whitetails would be more on the river bottoms. That would be one. If we're talking dreaming, I would take my little bird dog to Texas and hunt and I've never hunted Texas. I'd love to someday for deer. I'd have mornings and evenings to hunt whitetails out of a stand and then hunt quail
Oh,
with my
wow.
dog during the day. That would be a once in a lifetimer for me. But the act, is it reality? I don't know. But because of the land ownership patterns of Texas, I would think, you know, in big areas out east in the Appalachians, you could hunt deer and then hunt some rough grouse birds during the day. I think a fourth would be North Dakotas or southern Canada and deer and ducks, waterfowl. Um, those are, but for me it's usually pheasants and grouse.
Pheasants and grouse. And what is this is another sidebar, something because you just brought up some memories from me from the 80s. We used to go grouse hunting every year in northern Wisconsin, but what's the grouse situation in North America? Is it up, down? I know that used to be kind of like in cycles with ruffed grouse, but what's the situation with like rough grouse hunting?
Well, there's a couple kinds of grouse. Of course, we're talking forest grouse, which a lot of us Midwestern or deer hunters are familiar with, in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, which are the nexus of grouse and grouse hunting in North America. There's a storied history in the Northeast of grouse hunting, but you know, there's not as many grouse there anymore like there is in the upper Midwest in those states I mentioned, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, both the northern lower peninsula and all the upper peninsula. But the name of the game is habitat, as it is for all game. And with ruffed grouse, habitat is young forest. And no big surprise, there is a good logging industry. And logging is a ruffed grouse, and oh, by the way, a white-tailed deer's best friend. Climax forest is not friendly for most any types of wildlife, save for some songbirds, which are important too, in which there should be that type of habitat on the landscape, that mature forest. But a good paper and pulp industry keeps a lot of logging going in all these states and on public lands, which is good for ruffed grouse. So I don't worry about rough grouse. We there's all kinds of topics that's a whole different rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change and discussion on that and its effect, and rough grouse do have cycles, but the cycles are they getting bigger and smaller? So rough grouse I think are good, and we've named the places. If you want to shoot a rough grouse, probably go to northern Minnesota. There's millions of it. You could hunt 4,800 lifetimes up there and never walk the same land twice because there's so much public land. It's almost as good in Wisconsin, and it's almost as good in Michigan. What I worry about are prairie grouse. We talk about grouse, and you're talking to a prairie sort of guy here. Is I don't know if you know this, but this week, the week of June 12th, 13th, it's more than likely that the lesser prairie chicken is going to go on the endangered species
Really?
list.
I didn't know that.
That's scary stuff. And there's a bird that there were millions and millions of them, and there's 27,000 left.
Really? Wow.
If a bird like that can go on the endangered species list, what else can go on that endangered species list? I'm thinking about things like sage grouse. Um, a lot of you mentioned prairie chickens before, another native grouse. There's also sharp-tailed grouse. Greater prairie chickens and sharp-tails are doing fine in some areas, but if one species can go on the endangered species list, what about others? So
Is it more than just? Is it? You did mention climate change, but is that the main driving force behind this, or uh, is it habitat?
it's habitat. We've lost. Look at a. I ask readers, look at a map of the United States. Look at Kansas. Imagine the land mass of Kansas. That's the amount of grassland we've lost in the last decade in
Oh
our
my
country.
gosh! Wow, that's a lot.
And I'm not talking, oh, we lost pheasants here. I'm talking about that's pheasants, quail, sharptails, greater chickens, lesser prairie chickens, which are going on the endangered species list, songbirds, white-tailed deer. What better place to have rear fawns and hide out than 100 acres of grass? We all know that. It affects all manners of wildlife and life, including soil quality, water quality, and carbon sequestration to mitigate climate change.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like you said, those are a couple topics we could go off, and we'll probably that's some topics for another day, but some serious things to think about there. Let me ask you. Let's get off on one last topic here, Tom, because another thing you've done a lot for us. You are a consumptive hunter, just like me and just like everybody else. You've done a lot of work on venison, and you've contributed to our butcher shop column in the magazine. Lots of just not only good recipes, but also good topics. One of the more interesting topics, and it's talked about a lot at deer camps, is aging venison, and I know you've done some things on that. So the $64,000 question today is, can I age my own venison at home? Does it make a difference? And how do I do it? And do that, and give me that answer in like 3 minutes or less. No, I'm kidding.
So there's all kinds of schools of thought on aging venison. I think, I've heard the gamut. All right. I have a good butcher that sometimes I use out in in South Dakota. He would tell you, yeah, you just bring that animal in, cut it up, put it in the freezer. Heck, it don't matter if it's 3 hours. I have other people say, you gotta age it at least a week. I think there's some real, there's a certain minimum you should age a deer. It needs time to cool. It needs time. We all know what rigor mortis is, and it needs time to go through rigor mortis and then relax. And then you're probably okay whether you age it or not. I think ideally 2 to 3 days is about right, because my brother, my oldest brother Chuck, who is the head of the meat science department at Utah State University, would tell you that gives that meat a chance to break down. And I don't mean that it's the proteins in there that break it down. And I don't know all the science, but I know slightly aged venison, and I would call that 2 to 3 days tastes better. Here's a little sidebar story I'm going to tell you. This was probably 20 years ago. I shot a buck in Minnesota. Nice. I call it my perfect buck. It was a classic carp special buck. It was we all overestimate how big our deer are, by probably 30 to 50%. It was honestly a 110 to 120 pound live weight 6-point buck. And God, I was like most of them, I'm just proud as a peacock. God, I got another rack for my wall. I was at the stage of life where my kids were 2, 4, 6 years old. I didn't have time to butcher that deer myself, so I took it to the butcher. And it was a good deer year in Minnesota. And by the time I got there on Monday, they were loading up the second refrigerated trailer, to store all the carcasses. It was Wisconsin deer season before they butchered that deer, which is a 2-week gap between Minnesota and Wisconsin over here. I picked that deer up. That was the best GD deer I ever ate. And it sat for 2 weeks, because when I put it on the trailer, I was the first deer in the new trailer, and I'm like, you sure we can't put this one? So it was the last one out of the second trailer. So anyway, I've eaten deer that have been frozen in 4 hours after they're shot, and 2 weeks after they were shot, and most of them have been good. So how can I age a deer at home when the conditions aren't right? What are right conditions? 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Very
You
small window.
a small
Very
window,
small window.
and
Not 36 degrees and 52 degrees. Like you're saying about a 4 degree difference.
yeah, but I'll be honest with you, and I absolve myself of all true science behind this. But if it's cool at night, if it gets down to that some of that classic 30, 34, 32, 28 degrees, and it doesn't freeze the carcass, and it's 40, 45 during the day, it can stay there a couple days, especially if the skin is on. If it is cooled down, if the skin is on, to prevent it from drying. You can also pull the skin off to help a deer cool if it's a little warmer, but you better, that starts the drying process. That's what's going to affect your meat. What makes meat good? Juices and blood in it. So how do I get that 36 to 40 degrees if the hanging conditions aren't perfect? And one way I've expounded on is I get a big old cooler. I'll pull. People think, oh, I have to hang my deer whole age. It's like, no, you don't. It's just meat. I like to pull all the meat off the deer. I might leave. I'll put it in 6 pieces, both front legs, both back legs, and the big loins. And I'll pull out the little loins, the inside loins for delicacy, for camp meat, for the treat that everybody loves. Big cooler, ice on the bottom, right in the bags. I'll put towels over the top, and I'll lay in a little plastic over the meat so it doesn't pick up towel lint, and put the meat in that cooler and shut it. It's almost perfect. Ice is, cold, but it's 32 degrees. Even if it melts, that that water is about the right temp. You've got the door closed. You keep it dry. Don't put it on ice and let it soak in water. That soaks all the goodness out of it, and you've got sort of white. Keep it dry, keep it moist by keeping it sealed in this cooler, and then you can drain the water out of the ice and the water never touch the meat. I'll age a deer in there. We'll come back from a hunt and have our coolers full of deer, and I'll get home and be tired as a dog, and put those coolers in the garage, and a day or two later I'm a little rejuvenated. I'll just go out and work on those hunks of meat, one or two at a time, every evening till it's done, and they can just live in there till then. Try and get them done in a week.
That's something I've never heard of. I mean, I admit I've never tried the scientific way of doing it, because honestly, I guess I just don't have that refined of a palate where I've always told people, some people, they claim that they can tell the difference between taste in a Saskatchewan buck versus a buck from Maine or whatever, or Georgia. I can't. But what I find fascinating there is everything that I've always heard, pretty much in line what you said about temperature. We've published tons of stories on this, and most of the guys in the know always say no. It's a very small window of a couple degrees. It's got to be in that, like you said, 36 to 40 degrees. You can do it for a week, but I've never heard of actually just taking it off, putting it in a big Yeti cooler or something like that with ice. And I like your idea also of putting towels and plastic over the top, so it isn't soaking in water, because I've experienced that where people have thrown deer and then drive home from Wyoming and deer sitting in a pool of water, and the venison isn't as good.
Yeah, and I always think of it this way, that humans have survived a long time. And we used to eat a lot of, when we were cavemen, and I don't know if that's politically correct, but when we were cavemen, we used to eat most anything, and we all survived it. And yes, that window is tight, but it's also just smart common sense. Keep it cool. Ice is going to do that. And I also think about the meat you might buy in a supermarket.
Yeah.
Fresh meat. That meat didn't come off an animal 2-3 days before. It's a couple weeks old. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying meat does keep. And I'm not saying let that venison sit and sit and sit and sit. It is different than beef, and a lot of beef does get treated in different ways so it stays looking nice. But you can age a deer in that technique I talked about, and feel pretty good that it's going to be good wholesome meat, and not worry yourself about, oh my God, I got to get this whole deer butchered now, or it. I think it's a good way to age the meat, and also take it easy on yourself a little bit. I mean, it's hard work. I always say it takes me it field dressing aside, I think it takes me 3 to 3.5 hours to do a deer. Skin it, cut the meat off, cut the meat up, package it, and that doesn't include grinding burger. So you get four. My boys and I bring home 4 deer. You got 12 hours of work. That's a lot. So you can't do it all at once. So
That's a weekend, but it's a fun weekend. Making
it
meat.
is. And I'll leave us with this thought on this topic in butchering, which, I used to think of it as a chore, and you know what I think of it now? It's part of the hunt.
Exactly.
It's part of the hunt is shooting that deer. It's every much as part of the hunt is getting ready to shoot that deer. It's every much as part of the hunt of dragging that deer out. And oh, by the way, so is being at deer camp with people you love. And it's butchering, cutting that deer up is part of the hunt. I value it as much as hunting itself.
Awesome. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm taking a steak out of the freezer when I get home. And I think I'm going to
have venison shish kebabs for me.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. I got to throw those out for tomorrow. Well, Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Very much, as always, appreciate you visiting. And I hope the summer goes well for you and you have a great upcoming season. I know you're going to be excited about it.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun. And I hope, maybe we can take some of these topics and dissect them in the future. It's been fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
That's it for another episode. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you are listening to this, or if you want to listen to this somewhere else, it's on 14 different podcast platforms. Deer Talk Now. We can proudly say it is in the top 5 of all outdoor podcasts out there right now. And if you are listening and you want to watch the video version, we have that on our YouTube channel, which is simple. It's just YouTube /DDH Online, or you can see it on our social media pages. So for Tom Carpenter, I am Dan Schmidt. We will join you next time on Deer Talk Now.